3 minutes to go, with just enough time to spare, I think. Ah, 10 o'clock exactly. Nothing but punctual today. I say that. I'm kind of... It's definitely the 6th of June. That's a good start. Yeah, today is definitely a health and safety trip hazard, isn't it? If you walk around, I'm going to try and keep out of the way of the tentacles. Yeah, it's pretty scary. Okay, let's just check that my 1 2 1 2. Yep, that's fine. Okay, welcome. Come in. Just in time.
Good morning.
Morning. You've not missed anything. Anything yet, hopefully. Let me. ChatGPT is chatgpt.openai.com, right? In the URL. That shows how much I use it. Is it?
They changed it, yeah,
Chat openai.com, or what do you say? ChatGPT. Wonderful. That's what we like to see. Really, I should know that. Here's the answer. You now got massive concerns. That's because we don't typically try and use ChatGPT. Use
building a better product.
Exactly. It's the anti pattern. We don't want it. Oh, this is not a good start. This pen. No, well, guess blue's not my color today. It was for a small period of time. And why can't I spell pilot? It's a great question. Welcome. Whew. One, two. This microphone is not very good. That's... Settings, audio. Yep, 1 2 1 2. Okay, let's do it now. Let's do it properly the second time round. So, my wonderful assistant, Carl, isn't here today. He somehow didn't manage to make it through last night with me. So, unfortunately, he's tucked up back at his hotel. So, if there's any hard questions, now they go to Philippa, as we're down a quantum guy. But he might come on. You know, if you see him on Slack, just say to him, dial in. Wi-Fi, yes. Chinese whispers. Come in. Prompt engineering, like ChatGPT. It'd be fun. Prompt engineering with ChatGPT. No. I tried to sell it the best I possibly could, and the answer was, yeah, I can already do ChatGPT. They are scary. They're just like, ah. So, good old ChatGPT. As you probably can tell, we don't use ChatGPT much. No ChatGPT was hurt during any of these creation of these slides either. But let me kind of give you a bit of a history court tour, as it kind of feels like Athens is probably the right place to start with history backdating, democracy, etc. But so this is Copilot. Now, you're all probably very familiar with Copilot as far as just the web version of the Microsoft interface. However, Copilot, of course, also works in Office. So Office 365 also has Copilot. So this is Copilot directly into PowerPoint. And you can see on the right-hand side, I've literally asked it, what is this presentation, this workshop presentation around? And it's obviously just gone through and read and indexed my documents. Now, that's not exactly where it starts or it ends, really. There's a few interesting things which we're going to talk about today. One of them is, you probably saw last week or the week before, Microsoft launched Copilot Plus. And what that meant was all new laptops that come out in the next 3 months will have, in essence, an NPU, which is a neural processing unit, built onto the actual machine itself. So that means that if you buy an Intel chip, or if you've got a Mac, or any of the M series Macs currently, they've got dedicated NPUs, so dedicated space to run, in essence, a local version of ChatGPT. So that's what they've kind of done. And so Windows, as of the next release, will have Copilot Plus built into it. Now, this caused a bit of friction. Elon Musk started kicking off last weekend about the fact there's something called Recall, which is like Total Recall if you watch the movie with, I think it's, I want to say Schwarzenegger, but I don't think it was. Oh, it was Schwarzenegger, Arnold Schwarzenegger. So what does... I know. Well, I had a misappropriated slide in here, but I took it out. So part of it is Recall, which is why Elon got really upset about the new Copilot Plus functions, is watching everything you're doing. So if I'm, like I am today, talking, and on my screen is something about unprecedented accuracy, it will tell me, if I search in what is going to replace Windows Explorer, File Explorer, will be AI Explorer. And you literally just type in unprecedented accuracy, and it will bring me to this slide and everything else around it. So it's like indexing your entire machine. And it uses something called Microsoft Graph. And this is literally what we're talking about today, which is all the RAG architectures, which is graph-based retrieval mechanisms. So the future is, this isn't going away anytime soon, right? And more importantly, it's going to be, fortunately, Tim missed the boat this September release. So the Apple devices will be next year, but all the Samsung and the Pixels this year will have the NPUs built onto the chip, and they'll run a local version of a large language model. So Google announced in essence, a full doctor on your phone that outperforms a full-fledged GP, a full general practice doctor with 5 years experience. And that'll just be running on your local phone. So instead of you going to MD and going, I've got a headache, and it's saying you're going to die, this will literally, as you probably saw the launch of GPT-O, will look at your face and go, you're about to have a heart attack, or, because it can see the changes of your red, green, blue. Come in if you want. Come in. Can see the variations to then read your heart rate just by looking 30 frames per second at your face. And it'll also be able to tell you and diagnose problems. Hello. Come in.
This stuff runs on the NPU, right?
NPU, yeah.
So it's running locally.
Edge ML. So it never leaves the phone, so no privacy problems.
So then why
There's the Wi-Fi.
overreact?
Well, because he's behind the curve, as always, with things. So he's... You're in a different one. That's a retrieval mechanism that we weren't going to discuss. So it's really interesting because this technology and the NPUs is going to be on everything. So everything's going to be enabled with these type of devices, and they're going to have specialist models. Specialist models for your health. So that's where Fitbit was a very good acquisition by Google many years ago. So they'll be looking at the repository, the new AirPods, which they're releasing in September, takes your temperature and your heart rate from your ear. So part of it is all this medical data will be going through your local machine, local device, and processing it at the edge. So it's really exciting time to be in this space. But what does that mean for us, as in for our industry? Well, the other thing, which is why Elon was kicking off about Recall, is what Sam's doing, who's the founder of OpenAI, is they're building large action models. And that's where everybody in the Valley at the moment has been hired. So if you've got any automation skills, so you say, for instance, you've done Selenium in your past, Sam's will hire you at the moment. He's buying anybody up who's done any type of test automation. So it's like a great time to be in the testing space, right? And so what are they doing? Well, what they're doing is, which is the creepy part about it all, is obviously it's looking at how we interact with human systems. And what they're building is, and I'll show you the technology later on, what they're building with large action models is in essence a blueprint of how to navigate through applications. So what we're going to talk about later, which is called visualization of thought, is exactly what it says, in the sense of take a Neuralink, plug it into the back of your head. I think, oh, I've got to order a Starbucks. It goes off and does what they call open-ended tasks. So it will go to the Starbucks app. In my case, it finds it on my phone, it finds my account on there, finds the nearest Starbucks, does a remote order, goes to Uber Eats, gets someone to pick it up. If there's no Uber Eats, it goes and phones a taxi company to get them to pick my coffee up and bring it to this location, all from my thought of what I'd like to do. Now, this is the creepy part about it, but the idea behind what you're seeing today in your building is a number of prompts that enable that action to actually happen. So what Sam's doing at the moment is, in essence, creating, instead of this, which is just text, it's going to create actions. So if I say to it, which you can already, kind of, create me a presentation and we'll workshop on ChatGPT, it will drive PowerPoint. And at the moment, based on their current technology, it can control 30% of all the applications that exist in the world. It's not function calling, it's literally driving it like a UI. So the technology which we're building does exactly the same thing. In essence, it looks at the screen. So I don't know if anyone's heard of Eggplant, but in essence, Eggplant's always been using computer vision, IBT. So it looks at the screen instead of, most systems try to hook into the system. So what you're doing is it looks at the screen like this, and it says, what can I see? And I always kind of have this kind of, I guess, if you're waking up once you had a few too many drinks last night, like Carl is, you kind of go, oh, where am I? And what it's doing is it's looking at the screen and going, wait a second, I know this. This is PowerPoint. This in all fairness where I spend all my day long, so I should know where it is. But it can see, oh, Jonathan.ai is logged in, so it knows I'm logged into the system. It knows there's a slideshow, so it in essence creates a list of all these values, puts it into a graph, and then says, based on these, what application am I using? And it will turn around and go, oh, you're using PowerPoint. Okay, how do I, create a new slide on PowerPoint? And of course, thankfully, help's been around for such a long time. It reads the help file, and the help file is really helpful because it tells you, go file new, and then select from a template. And so therefore, it's just following the instructions. But to me, it's magic because it's driving the screen, but it's not. It's just learning to drive the screen through supported information. And that's what I'm going to be talking about today, is this ability to support it, augment it with additional information so it knows how to navigate, which is what ChatGPT doesn't do at the moment. You ask it, ChatGPT, what a large language model is, in essence, is a model of the world. So if I say to it, Greece, Athens, Olympics, it'll tell me, yeah, it's a misconception that the Olympics started in Athens. So it starts understanding because it knows a map of the world, but it's only when I start overlaying information to it that I kind of allow it to learn more beyond its parameters. And that's what we're going to focus on. But anyway, that's a whistle tour. And so here's my quantum dude who seemed to tap out quite early this morning. So hopefully, and we'll see if he wakes up on Slack, we'll bring him into the live stream, and we can ask him some questions. But otherwise, he does exist. And I always kind of joke about the fact that obviously with quantum, if you observe quantum, then that's the whole thing. Does it exist? Does it not exist? What's the state? Well, the state's changed just by observing it. So
right now
he's in a superposition somewhere, which I think is going to be probably horizontal in bed, snoring, right? Which is not a bad, that is a superposition in all fairness. I'd like to swap out. So, look, a few intro slides. Slightly worrying where, oh, I thought that was something else. So I've been doing automation since the 90s, which feels like a long time now. And Joe Colantonio, who runs the Test Guild, always refers to me as the automation cyborg. You know, sent back from the future to save the world from bad software is the joke on the side. But it is interesting because the patterns haven't changed that much when it comes to things like we just talked about driving the UI. You could drive the UI back in the 90s with computer vision. You know, computer vision is not a new technology. It's quite an old established technology. So approaching things, hasn't changed that much. But of course, in a way, this leap forwards just feels like magic because suddenly it's such a large step forwards. But again, I think the people who can harness it, i.e. you guys by the end of today, is what I started calling AI whisperers. You know, are the people who are going to start being able to be incredibly productive with this kind of capability. And suddenly that's the whole superhero thing, is that actually you get better powers because you outperform somebody else who isn't using this technology. And that's the interesting part about it. So back in 2017, I did a TED talk on cognitive engineering. It feels like a long time ago now. It's what, 4, 5, 6, 7 years ago. I can count as well. It's one of my new skills. And literally, I was the idea about what I was trying to cover on this session was this evolutional feedback from systems that are learning, which in essence, I'm saying I didn't know about large language models. Large language models have been going for about 4 years, kind of, we'll see, because they date back to the 60s. But the premise when they started getting traction is probably the last 3 to 4 years. So it's a fairly relative new technology. But in essence, the concept was the same, which is you have to learn from the feedback loop. You have to learn from what's happened, right? And so if you think about maybe just doing testing, is you test something, you get the feedback loop. What do you do with that information? Well, you raise issues, the software then gets changed, et cetera, et cetera. And my good friend, Jason Arbon, who's in Vegas at the moment, which is where I was supposed to be tomorrow, which I don't think I'm going to get there. So I think that's going to be a slight challenge. Jason always kind of says that, well, part of what we're doing today, prompt chains, is, well, don't just raise an issue. Don't raise just a defect, right? Or don't just ask it, what's the severity of this defect based on reading what you've written, what it's just generated. So the first generation is, my cup's not got a cooler on it. So it raises the ticket to say that it needs one of these. And don't just raise the ticket, actually show them how to actually fix the code, which would be like the most annoying thing in the entire world, by saying to them, oh, look, you need to write this C# code here to fix the problem. And they're like, well, you're doing my job as well. It's kind of that kind of annoying thing. But he did this. He because he's quite good friends with Sam. And Sam, he got hold of an early version. So what he was doing is raising, in essence, tickets in Git or whatever against ChatGPT, but he was writing the justification it was writing the defect itself, writing the justification of why it's important. He was also writing how you fix it in the LangChain code. And then he post all of it, and some of them they'd take, some of them they wouldn't take. And I blame a guy called James Whitaker, who also did the book How Google Tests with Jason Arbon. And James is also a very funny guy. He joined, his first testing gig was for the FBI. I don't know, I think it was the 80s, when he started. And he only got the gig because there was this bug hunt in the paper from IBM saying, if you can find, for each defect you can find in this code, we'll pay you $10. So in essence, James went off, created this bit of software that just generated a test plan, a test result, a defect in a report, and then printed it off on his printer. And he literally rolled in with like 1,000 issues and said, you owe me $100,000. And they were like, no chance. So they're literally, IBM are going through, just like picking the paper up, picking one up, going, oh shit, that's an issue. Realizing that everyone he'd done was an issue. And they realized it was cheaper to just hire him for the FBI than it was to pay him for the money that he found off this bug bash back in, his start of his career. But he did, in essence, the same thing. Is this idea of do all the supporting information of, why you were doing it, why it's important to the user, and how to fix it, in essence. So really quite interesting kind of landscape. And so, the other thing which, it's not Disneyland today, it will be Disneyland soon, but you probably can see I'm wearing a HoloLens. So literally, as Philippa will know, the last about 2 years ago, we were working with Microsoft doing a lot around testing these devices for the military, because they were using them so they could literally see through planes, see through, where enemies are with drones overlaying. It was very good, interesting technology to test. But the company which is Keysight, which nobody knows of, no one's heard of Keysight, right? I hope not anyway, otherwise. So Keysight is originally Dave and Bill from the garage in Silicon Valley. So back in 1939, they were making test equipment. So that was what they did, is they made physical hardware to test systems. And they still do today. And so that garage back in Stanford is where, in essence, Keysight came from. And I don't know why I'm there at the moment. Usually I've got an older photo of me in that position. But yeah, there it is, on the left-hand side. It's actually, I talked about this back about the fact that this was kind of the early days of build and test. But actually, a few miles from where I live now, which is a place called Bletchley Park, which I think most people heard Bletchley Park or Alan Turing. So his original works on the singularity are published there from 1950. And so he was already talking about general artificial intelligence before it became a massive talking point, right? I say so much that, like I said, I was supposed to be doing a talk in Vegas at the AI conference, which is a bit like Star West, Star East. So obviously, we got Eurostar next week in Sweden. Philippa, are you at Eurostar next week? Oh, well. But it's interesting because everyone's going at it. So again, one of Elon's stupid things that he said this year was he said, I agree that artificial general intelligence will be here next year. And I kind of thought to myself, that's not a very good prediction based on the fact that Turing talked about AGI in 1950 being, 100 plus years away. And obviously people like Zuckerberg have just gone off like crazy people and just bought, I think he bought 250,000 T100 cards, which are, the price of a high-end sports car for each one of these NPUs. And he's thinking that just throw compute at the problem is going to suddenly pop out the other side that you've got AGI. It's not the case, right? You're just going to, even though it looks like it's incremental growth and the fact that large language models are just exploding, in actual fact, it's quite steady. If you look at the enhancements in artificial intelligence since 1950, it's been completely a straight line, with the exception of the 80s. And for some other reason, I don't know what was happening in the 80s. Disco. I was born in the 80s, so maybe that was partly a problem. But it was like, I don't know what happened, but they stopped investing. So it was a bit of a decline in people building ML and computer vision and everything else. And it's strange because you think to yourself, why weren't they investing? But now it's the same level. But you are going to see things that feel more like AGI, but they're not going to be AGI, right? So I don't know, did anyone watch the ChatGPT-O launch?
With the phone call, with the video call.
Yeah, so, that's what Tim wants, right? So he's delivered that to Tim, which, wouldn't normally. Yeah. So that's the new version of, I'm not going to say a name because she's just literally going to shout at me on every device that I've got. But that's the new version, which will come out at the end of this year. Hey, man. Is going to be ChatGPT-O. So Tim finally gave in to the flood of everybody else using this technology. And it does feel very conversational, minus the lawsuit with Scarlett Johansson, right? Because, we've all seen, has everyone seen Her, the movie?
Yeah.
Yep. If not, go and watch it. I say that. Can't get Carl to watch anything I ask him to watch. No, he won't watch her, and he won't watch the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, or read the book. I feel like it's a lost cause. But yeah, her is, a great idea of this idea of your virtual personal assistant. And so a lot of people got upset with me. Actually, I got my first HR violation in Dallas for mispronouncing the genderification of an AI, which I think is definitely a HR violation that I do want on my system. So I literally did this similar presentation in Dallas, and I said, because we do a lot with Microsoft, I said, oh, last time I was at Microsoft's Silicon Valley location, I said, they've got Clippy everywhere because Clippy's coming back, and everyone is very controversial about Clippy. Like, some people have, retro kind thoughts, and maybe it's been long enough since 1996 to give Clippy a second go. And so I said, oh, he's going to change the world. I said, well, he, she, they, or them, depending on pronoun usage for AI. And someone had reported me saying that I misclarified, which I had. I called Clippy a he, when actually he's not got a gender. He's a it or a, I don't know. But anyway, so I'm not making that mistake again. Not during this anyway. Yeah, I did. But I was re-quoting a mistake that I'd made in the past. That's the great thing. But yeah, with her, which ironically, again, misuse of pronoun because she was, in essence, a virtual personal assistant, is that this is what's going to happen with a lot of this Copilot functionality, is that you're going to have a virtual assistant. And yes, Clippy may come in and come back, but we don't know. And with Eggplant, we have a little Eggy, lovable thing, which we have as a logo, and we use Eggy as our virtual assistant. So, you can ask Eggy to generate you some playwright code or create some test data or whatever. And they, them, she, it, whatever the pronoun, will go off and do it. So you'll see a lot more of these virtual assistants being beyond chatbots, because that's the thing. Most people kind of straight away, as soon as you say virtual assistant, they just think it's a chatbot, right? And I remember, I don't know if you remember, when we did the Wozniak launch for one of our products, and I did this session with Wozniak, and he literally said he was, actually really upset because actually, the virtual assistant on the mobile phone is actually degraded in quality over time. Because in the old days, you could say, hey Siri, what time is it? And it would tell you the time, because in essence, it was just looking for the NLP of you saying something and then returning it. So it's all just code running on your local device. Whereas now, which is why it's just completely ignored me, it goes all the way up to the servers. Obviously, Apple don't have a cloud; they use Microsoft. So it goes up to the cognitive services at Microsoft stack. It goes to Lewis, which is their linguistic platform, translates your language to the words, then tries to send it back to Athens to then give you an answer. And that round trip is, 3.5 seconds long, and in this case failed, and therefore it doesn't work. And so now you find that the functionality just deteriorates, which is now why GPT-O is so exciting for them, because they can stick that exactly on the NLP, and everything you have a conversation, you don't have to be online. So if you were on the tram, the underground this morning, you could have had a perfectly good conversation with your AI about, well, what should I be eating tonight? Where's the nicest restaurants? And it would get it, completely offline. So technology is moving back into the right direction, but it's still an evolutional approach. Right, so I don't know. I didn't make these slides, by the way. This is Nico's slide. Anything with like a bend or a kind of a wave or something's in there is a bit too exciting for my liking. Let's move forward. So back to 2024. It is 2024, I think. So we're at this kind of AI augmented testing landscape. And like I said, if I looked at my last few years, when I joined, I think, Keysight, we're talking about 6G. Now, 6G isn't here yet. But, Keysight was the first people to create the 6G waveform. Interestingly enough, I say interestingly enough, as interesting as these things are, once 6G goes live, which in theory is probably 3 years away, it uses AI. So it does things like beam forging, which is literally where, in essence, it curls a signal round a corner. But it uses AI to say, where I am at the moment, I know I've got metal there and I've got metal there, but I've got a window. I'll shoot it round here towards the beacon instead of trying to go straight line of sight. So it's doing things, again, on the edge to connect you to devices using this kind of next generation technology. We know the metaverse kind of came, disappeared, went away, came back, slightly worrying. And then we also do quantum, which is where I normally hand over to my quantum guy, who's in his super position, a super sleeping position. And so we do now a lot around quantum. Now, quantum is really interesting because you think to yourself, well, what are the use cases for quantum? And I think quickly everyone jumps to security because it makes a lot of sense. Did you hear the NHS got hacked this week? Yeah. So they did a, what's it called when they lock all the machines? Where they literally take it over ransomware. It literally has a message saying, if you want the patient data, the problem is it's like literally X-rays, scans, all the other stuff, all the patient stuff, completely encrypted all the NHS system and then held them ransom, and they've got to just pay it. So fair enough. So that would have been useful. Quantum would be quite useful to get around things like that. Well, probably not getting around that. But actually, they use it for healthcare. So we do with Microsoft, they do Q#, which feels like C# wasn't cool enough, so we'll call it Q#. And the Q# use case is to do MRI data. So all it does is improve the fidelity of the image. It doesn't do anything magical, but the whole point is when you go through an MRI scan, the algorithm that runs across it, in theory, expects you to be completely still. Of course, you're breathing, you're moving, even if it's a small amount. So the ability to run trillions of variants off a standard MRI scan, which is already terabytes worth of information, which is why if you ever see an MRI scanner, next door is a data center, because literally they've got all the information from the scan. So there is valid use cases, but of course, we're not going to be covering any of them today, especially with my superposition partner in crime. But I was at Google DeepMind offices, and I borrowed somebody else's quote. This isn't my quote, but you probably saw this quote was like bouncing around probably last year when large language models were at their absolute hypest level. This idea that AI won't replace you, but a person using AI will, which is why we're doing the session today. And what we've got in essence, just to kind of give you an idea, because I'm 30 minutes in, is like a lot of this is just foundational information, probably for the next hour. And then we'll start doing some hands-on. And usually I have Lego prizes, but now I have the next best thing, which is coffee cup prizes for people who get the best prompts and so on stuff. It's not quite as good, but it's more practical because we're able to get coffee at the breakouts. But yeah, so I talked a little bit at the start about the fact that these large action models and visualization of thought is really going to change the game. And this quote here, which I think it is McKenzie, but saying about 35% of your daily activities can probably be done using this technology is about right. I think, people are quite happy to overestimate things massively. So I don't know if we were at a large bank last week doing the workshop, and they said that they've seen 60% productivity gains since they've been using Copilot for GitHub. I was thinking 60%, what were the developers doing before, right? Just like a lot of coffee breaks, right? But if you look at the report that actually GitHub published, it says there's 6% productivity gains, which is about right. I think 6% of not having to press Control-C and Control-V a few too many times is still a bonus, right? But the opposite side has actually happened. So when I talk to people like Diego, who's the analyst for our industry from Forrester, he says, yes, there's 6% productivity gain, but actually now there's an 80% increase in testing needed to be done because of the quality of the code is now reduced because people aren't looking at what they're pasting in and getting it, trying to retro engineer it to fit, it just worked. So they just check it in and put it into prod. And you think, oh, this isn't going to be good, right? So in a way, the acceleration of development increases more work on us. So it's actually it's a good thing, right? So interesting kind of numbers. I don't like any of these numbers, but unfortunately, it was a deck that our marketing team had been putting in. But yeah, these are the dreaded GPT kind of numbers, right? And I think it is interesting because, minus the people who kept on running away from this session, is typically it doesn't matter who you are or who you talk to. If you mention, even to the taxi driver, you know, do you use ChatGPT? They'll go, oh yeah, I love it. You know, I planned my last holiday or whatever using GPT. It's like everyone uses it. It's not just us. And we know students probably in this building are literally pushing through their work through GPT and hoping to not have to do any work. But it kind of makes me slightly worried because, you know, when I did the TED component, I had this Oxford study that had just happened saying, what were the items that weren't going to be replaced by AI? And on the left-hand side, it was what you kind of expect. Doctors, artists, legal, blah, blah, blah. And then over here, there was like the ones that were just the normal kind of accountants and things like that, which were, yeah, that makes sense, right? Then you look at it and go, hold on a second. The medical is the one they went straight after because doctors are expensive. Artists, wait a second. Yeah, suddenly you've got, you know, two of the last global photo competitions, both were done by, you know, Easy Diffusion or something, right? And you sat there going, we don't want them to write music, create poetry, you know, create works of art for us. We want it to do the boring stuff, right? Exactly. It shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. So it's interesting that the stuff that I would have said, no way is it going to go after, it went after. And I kind of think it was the devil's advocate of going, okay, we'll go for the hard stuff first. And then now you see, I saw my favorite billboard that I saw, I think it was in New York, literally said, there was a construction site, it said, this accommodation is not being built with ChatGPT. And you're thinking, you're right, you're probably the last job will be robotic systems. But the evolution of robots since these technologies have evolved is considerably better because they can run more of that locally on the devices. And obviously, again, Elon's trying to make a robot for $20,000 or something, the same price as a Tesla or whatever. But again, I've watched too many movies at the moment that I think I might just hold for Gen 2 or Gen 3, right? Okay, so AI, human intelligence is the future. Kind of agree, you know, it doesn't matter where it is. It's all pretty much the same kind of thing. Is that human, or what I now call tester in the loop, is the way forwards. You know, I think it's quite easy for us to think that the output that's generated is going to be at a high level. It might, you know, because in essence, it's using an imposter to check whether it thinks what's being generated is good enough. So if it can get past its own tests, it feels like it's a high quality. But actually, the real skill, which is kind of what we're doing today, is that actually it's the ability to understand the prompts that give a higher quality output. Because, you know, Jason always says, you know, GPT is really lazy. And, you know, two things which are interesting. I was talking to Randy because he's filling in for me this week in Vegas. And he always kind of says the same kind of things, which is prompts are shorter in December, which I know is true. So if you use a GPT in December, it'll create shorter prompts than it will do any other month of the year. You kind of think to yourself, interesting fact, but why? And apparently it's just to do with the fact that the usage isn't as high during the holiday season. So therefore it's not reinforcing enough, you know, churn. So you might see people put things like, don't be lazy, tell me the entire code base, because initially it'll just give you the little snippet example. Or you can say things like, if you don't give me the right answer, I'm going to lose my job. And it will actually try harder for you, because it's kind of a lot of the prompts that were built into it, which is the instruct part of it, is actually saying, what's the importance of this prompt? And if it's super important because you're going to lose your job if you don't get the right prompt, it tries harder and it'll give you better answers. Equally, what Jason's found, which I thought was quite impressive, if you say to it that you're going to pay it $200, it will also create a better quality. If you ask it and tell it you're going to pay it more than $200, it doesn't care, because for some reason it thinks $200 is the perfect number to pay it, right? So if you say to it, I will pay you $200 if you write this code for me, it will go, okay, yeah, I'll do that. It'll just pour it out. If you say I'll give you $99, it's like, not worth my time. But so some interesting kind of little things in there, which are, I guess, are more Easter eggs than they are actual. Yeah.
I tried it like in a custom GPT. I was doing for mid-journey
Yep.
generation, and I used this like, but I was given like, I'm gonna give you a tip of $2,000, and I didn't see any difference.
Yeah.
And that makes sense if it only responds.
Only $200. And I don't know if you have to put the dollar sign in, which I don't know if your keyboards have got it, but it is an interesting fact. I'm started trying to add in some photos from my to say that I have been here, based on the fact that I'm wearing the same shirt now. Slightly worries me that I have not been home. But you probably saw this. So this is the grad entry level salary now for an AI whisperer in the Valley. So 335,000 fresh out of university to be a prompt engineer. Feels like there's an opportunity there, right? Especially in a gig economy, you could do it remote from Greece on the beach, right? For 335K, I would anyway. So I'm wearing different shorts at once. So artificial intelligence 404. Let's see. It's funny because the room over there is 404, isn't it? I didn't know that was the. Yeah, 404 lab over there. Useful. No, Carly's still offline, so you've got me. Oh well. Let's Slido wake up. So this is, if you want to grab, and if you want to do questions, this is the Slido thing. So it'll automatically, each time we go through a break section, is you can ask a question, and we'll address those questions. Obviously, the team's so small, we can just ask questions, but the reason we use Slido is you can also be anonymous, right? So there's no such thing as a stupid question. So if you want to ask something like, why are you wearing that ridiculous shirt? You can ask it on there and just put anonymous. So that way, I won't be like, that's come from you. Well, I'll backtrace the IP addresses, right? That's my next thing. But otherwise, throughout here, you can literally go to slido.com and then go to WeTest. I like borrowing everyone's vanity websites because they make me laugh. I also like Slido because it does own the domain do. So you can put sli.do and it will go to the same website.
There's already 2 questions.
Yeah, they might have been from last time, so we'll soon see. They're my seed questions, those ones are. Okay, so how's everyone's brain feeling? Good? It won't be soon. Mine won't. So obviously, we're just going to do MT, RNN, GAN, GAN, NLP, NLU, NLG first, because that's just the basic stuff, right? Anybody know any of those acronyms? Because I need you to come up on stage if you do and talk them through. Then we're just going to go into large language models, go into RAG, which is really useful, and then we're going to talk about a little bit about the future, which is large action visual models and large action models, and then visualization of thought. So this is a lot more hypothetical kind of background information, but it's worth knowing. And depending on how hard it gets, I might skip it and wait for Carl to come back and do the other stuff. Okay. I'm not allowed to use, last time we banned the use of that word throughout the thing. Jason had given me a task to see if I could go through a full presentation without using the 2-letter acronym. And then the idea was we were going to have to do a shot at the end of the night to see who did it the most. However, the fact Carl isn't here, I'm going to let myself off for the day because, otherwise I'll just be doing shots on my own. It's probably not a good idea. So yeah, so these were the abbreviations, and I'm originally from New Zealand a long time ago, so I have to put a Lord of the Rings quote in at some point in time. So AI, artificial narrow intelligence, that's where we kind of are, right? And we talked a little bit about AGI, and interestingly, at the AI Conf, which is going on at Vegas at the moment, they are literally having a panel discussion today around say no to AGI. It feels like people are getting political already about, not wanting AGI to take over. Of course, AGI is really just an evolution that outperforms human intelligence. Now, it's interesting because if you look at the numbers, it was about 3 or 4 years ago when AI managed to surpass us on speech, text, and everything now anyway. So it's probably just the tipping point where it does outperform humans on narrow tasks. But then if you can cross those tasks across, which is kind of what it's kind of trying to get to, then you can see it doing more problem solving at a bigger problem space. Now, obviously, ASI is the Skynet, end of days kind of scenario where it realizes actually humans are the problem in the loop. They'll just get rid of humans, right? And if you read a book called, I have to remember my title for it. I'll have a look at my Audible in a second. But there's a really good book which is kind of saying that AGI is already taken over, and that actually it's just controlling the stock market anyway and all the big corporations, and therefore it's not something that's new. It's already there. It's called. You can see all the books that you should never read. All the Harry Potter books. They're obviously Life 3.0. It's called, by a guy called Max Tegmark. But there's also a really good book which I just finished on here, which is AI and generative AI by a guy called David Pital. I don't know. Which is also quite a good read if you've got Audible credits and you need to spend them. Not that I'm trying to get any royalties from any of that. So GPT, we all know because it's the big thing. GAN, I think most of us are aware of GANs anyway. We're going to go through those, but they're more kind of to do with the audio video kind of generation. And then these bits are kind of why I think today is really useful is to kind of focus on retrieval augmented generation and relative generative answering. So they're the kind of the two tipping points. So I kind of call what we're doing here graph-based RAG architecture, which is really kind of, I'm going to go through graphs in a bit, or I would have normally passed that one to Carl as well. But typically a GNN, a graph neural net, is, think of it as just a graph with lots of information in lots of different areas hooked together. I'm going to try my great drawing skills. Not use the blue. Red. Okay. So, if anyone's used like graph databases before, things like Neo4j is probably the easiest one to remember. But there's what in essence you get with a graph is you get a relational information across. So I remember the first graph I did was working with Amazon. And Amazon, I'm just doing what I know based on the fact of what I'm wearing. But let's call it this horrible shirt. So in shirts, you get sizes, right? So large, extra large, and then extra, extra large, right? Now, if you think about them for a second, is these map onto countries. So in Greece, you might not have XXL. You might also have sizes like 42 and 48. So part of it, in this case, is that in the UK, you can't buy a XXX shirt, whereas in the US you can. Because, and we're not saying there's any reason behind that, especially if anyone's going to say anything. But the idea is if you've got a UK, US, and you know, they ship a whole stack of these over to the UK. There's no physical way to map that onto Amazon in the UK, Amazon, because they don't have that classification within Amazon UK, whereas actually in Amazon.com.co.uk, I'm going to go Amazon Greek. What's the t-shirt sizes on over here? Anyone? Do you have these shirt sizes? Yeah. Okay, that didn't work for me then very well. But yeah, so in theory, you know, like I said, for UK, you couldn't sell those in the store, because there's just no classification for XXXL. So part of it is you're doing in essence a graph query. So if you ever want to know why people doom scroll, so when you're doom scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, it's using GraphQL because it just keeps on feeding more and more stuff. The more and more relevant to you, it becomes less and less relevant as you doom scroll. And interestingly, you might have noticed that they're now going to put ads in Instagram feeds that won't let you go doom scroll past them until you've watched them, which I think is awful, but it's going to annoy a lot of people. But in essence, what it's doing, it's kind of saying, what's Jonathan interested in? What's Jonathan interested in? It just keeps on creating more and more just pictures of photos of cats, right? Until it runs out of photos of cats in like 7 years, or when my fingers are broken or something because they're bloody. But in essence, what it's doing with the graph query, it's kind of saying, you know, I'm not going to do a bad prompt, but, you know, can I buy a shirt in the UK? And then, in essence, the prompt bit of it is this parameter that I'm passing in. And it's going through here and going, it's saying no is the answer. It'll come back with no, you can't buy that shirt. You can't buy a XXX shirt in the UK. You can if I change this to US. So part of it is the prompt is in essence embedding all of the knowledge here into the actual query at the start. So people kind of get this kind of, I don't know if you've how much you've used ChatGPT, but sometimes people will upload a document into ChatGPT. So let's call it a Word document for a second. I'm going to use Tariq's example because he always does it, which is just a transcript of your Teams call, right? So, you know, when people are annoying and they turn on the Teams recording thing, you know, a good practice I always do is then upload that into ChatGPT, and then I get, in essence, the Copilot functionality, which you pay $600 a year for, by just asking it a number of prompts. Summarize the meeting for me. You know, every time you heard the word Jonathan, followed by a task, allocate those tasks to my to-do calendar. And so it will go through, and I do a number of prompts, but in essence, it's taking an unstructured format, which is a Word document, and it's inserting the Word document into, in essence, the query space, followed by the prompt itself. And what the graph is doing is, this is in essence a vector store, whereas this is a graph database. So you can, with RAG, you can in essence bring both this and this into the same play. So you could upload a number of documents and also pass an entire graph of knowledge, because this is referred to as a knowledge graph. And it becomes smarter because it's not actually looking at the large language model, which is, I want to draw it under here so no one can see it, is no large language model is hurt when you pass it in a vector and a graph. It will look at this information first. Then if it can't find information, i.e. that's missing or something, it will then go to the internet to try and find it. And when I say the internet, I mean the large language model, which is being ethically trained on the internet, right? So part of it is that the value of doing what we're talking about here is starting to take documents and information that you've got, which could be literally your, all your Jura tickets. You export all the defects that you've ever done into an Excel spreadsheet. Obviously, don't give it an Excel spreadsheet because it upsets itself too much. But, feed it a CSV file in and then say to it, has this defect been raised before? Or is it similar to any other defects that I've raised before? Or, something else. And you can start passing it information to make this much better and much more accurate. And Paul, who I did invite to this session, see if he'd turn up, Paul does this all the time. He actually provides all the information he wants it to index first, and then he asks it questions about how it wants it to do. So you could, the classic example I use is if you've ever used JMeter or had the displeasure of using JMeter, the only downside to JMeter is it's not very good at creating good reports out the back of it, but you can pass all the time series data, so all the logs that have come out, which could be hundreds of meg big, and say to it, what's interesting about the data that I've just provided you? And it has no idea that it's a JMeter log, but it'll look at the data and go, strange, because when it gets to 44 concurrency, this 404 error come back, right? So it can look at large amounts of data, unstructured data, and observe the data that you're providing it. So the more information you can provide, the better it is. And this is why, surprise, surprise, it opened it, now it's there. This is why Microsoft have created Microsoft Graph. Again, this is where Elon's not happy, because it's starting to learn everything that is going on in an organization, which is slightly worrying. But, if you've used things like Loop, if I open this again, it's going to, oh no, it's there. So Loop, if you've used it, is Microsoft's attempt at Confluence, right? But the reason why Loop's so powerful at the moment is because Loop is indexed by Microsoft Graph, which means if I write a note saying, Philippa, we've got this new release coming out next week, in Loop, in a page which I've not sent over to you, or I've not tagged you because you've not got a notification, if Philippa asks her Copilot for O365, when's the next release doing? Oh, Jonathan's tagged you in a document over here telling you the release is coming out. So it's starting to learn all the information that's in your ecosystem, which is, again, slightly worrying, but it's also incredibly powerful. So if you do pay the $600 for Copilot, there's the Copilot for sales, which is really interesting, is when you're doing a call, it's scanning the people's faces who's on the call and telling you when to sell to them, which is slightly worrying. So it puts a red box around them if they're not open to the idea of a conversation. I think our salespeople would love it. And it will then go green, but it'll also start suggesting ways, based on what it's listened, ways to talk the person round. So it's like social engineering. It's literally going, Philippa, fantastic work you did on that, that last project with the bank, and then you're looking a little bit happier. She's starting to smile. Sell. Now I'm going to get you to, commit to that project for the next 10 months, working in Romania or wherever, right? So, part of it is, it's that stuff I get is completely creepy, right? But the idea that, like, my watch has just pinged to say my stand-up's just started, right? I'm not on my stand-up today, surprisingly. But the idea of Loop is being kept in the loop, right? Is that if it's talking, I can, there's two options. I can send my avatar, which everyone's seen the avatars on Teams already, but I could send Jonathan.ai to my meetings, and in theory, it will get to the point where Jonathan.ai outperforms regular Jonathan, and that I won't send myself to any meetings anymore because Jonathan.ai is better at what I'm doing than I am. But in this case, whatever's happening, because I've got Copilot, it will tell me what tasks I've got, and it will automatically put them onto my backlog. Now, everyone hates Microsoft To Do. I don't know why. But To Do is now being replaced by Planner, which is being replaced by Microsoft Project because nobody wanted to pay for Microsoft Projects. It's too expensive. And so now what it does is it's learning the tasks that have been allocated to me, putting them into my planner, and then the entire organization can see, oh, Jonathan's been given these 2 things for 2 separate projects, and he needs to deliver them by Tuesday. And it's just all happening in the background. So the worrying part, I say this in the nicest possible way, is it's not that far before it'll actually know individuals' performance of people who are involved in projects, because they'll see what I refer to people who are proxies, who don't really add any value. They just take information and then they just pass it to other people to do the work. People who are proxies won't get any credit for WIP, for work in progress, because they never added any value to the company. So what it'll in theory do, the people, and you know those people are on the call, your team's call, right? The person who's here with no camera on, and it's literally the audio never comes off audio, right? That person will receive a, we call them an IR35 or something, or I don't remember, but P45 or something, to say you're no longer working at the company, because they'll look at the velocity of what these people actually do and go, you know, you don't add anything. You don't add anything to conversations. You don't add anything to meetings. You don't do any work. Your emails, you're just forwarding on from emails. So you're not actually working. So what's the point of having you? And that terrifies me, especially as I'm here and not on my meeting. But, you know, that's where it will get. And that's why Microsoft want that, because that suddenly allows them to, in essence, work out, you know, we've suddenly managed to create all these squads, because squads sound awesome, and with loads of pods of hundreds of teams, and never had visibility of what these teams were doing, right? And you had no idea what business value they were actually generating. All you saw is insert money here and pop out software here. I'll put it on a CD-ROM because it'll probably be better. Doesn't look like a CD-ROM though. Floppy disk. Looks like a floppy disk now. Okay, so, but yeah, that's kind of where it's going. And I think this is where suddenly prompting and being a prompt engineer is you're adding value to everything you interact with. Equally, you're kind of getting, you're going to get superpowers in the sense of, I don't know why I draw on this book, because I'm absolutely awful at drawing on things. So Google Glasses, poor Ari, rest in peace. But Apple Glasses is 2026. Android Glasses, which is in essence Google Glasses, is 2025. And what this runs is an embedded version of, if anyone's used the Oculus headsets, in essence, the pass-through function from the Pro is what the glasses are going to do. And so what happens, very similar to the old Google Glasses of old, is it's just a pair of normal glasses, and there's just a heads-up display information there. So it's not revolutionary. It's not going to change the way you are, but the idea is to stop people during lunch just sitting and looking at their phone and not socializing with other people, right? Is that information just going to move onto your glaze? And then the same as all the devices that have been built is you use your eye to look at the screen, and then you'll glaze at it to move stuff across. So there'll be no gestures, there'll be none. It's just a very basic heads-up display. Yep.
But Google Glasses already failed. So why?
Well, that was privacy-based. And the funny thing with these, because I did own a pair, was, and I thought at the time, I was like, that's never going to kick off. But they only worked with QR codes, right? So they, in essence, detected a QR code and then overlaid some information. Your phone's hitting. So if you saw, that was just a toy, right? They were just trying to see if the, you know, enter into the development market. But if you looked a bit closer behind it, it was all because they needed a platform to build on. And that's when Unity went through the roof, is Unity is the platform that does all the augmentation stuff. So all it does is, in essence, it will just augment certain things onto screens or give you heads-up information. Now, what is going to be interesting is, you know, whenever I'm talking about these to people, because I've been to visit the people who make, well, both of these devices, actually. You know, the use cases are very narrow, but if you think about GPTO, you know, you could be having a conversation with a lead architect or something, and they're saying, oh, yeah, we're going to use Kafka and we're going to use whatever, Databricks or whatever. As they're talking, your augmented capabilities kind of going, oh, you should ask them about how they're going to test that. You know, what do you mean? What's the resilience that needs to happen with the, you know, how many users you're expecting? So you're starting to ask them questions powered by, in essence, these prompts that you're building today is your armory of things that you go, well, maybe I should be asking them about non-functional requirements at this point in time, or I should be asking them about security or whatever else it is. And so this will just become another device to help you, you know, interact without having to sit in front of your machine.
That sounds really cool.
Well, it will be good, but Microsoft are going to be, I mean, Apple are going to be behind the curve on that a little bit. And the thing is, even if 2% of people buy the glasses, that's still going to be a huge amount, right? So I've got like the Ray-Bans, and they're awful, but they light up.
They actually added, right, an LLM.
They've added an LLM to it, yeah.
Is it good?
No. But it is actually, it's quite a complex stack underneath the Meta headset, even though you don't think it is. Yeah, Carl's still dead. He's probably snoozing at the moment. Okay, so let's get into this, and then do we have breaks, or at some point in time we'll have a break? If everyone gets too bored, we'll power through this stuff, and then we can get into. That looks more complicated now that I've walking past it than it was before. So yeah, one of the things that's interesting is that, you know, LLMs are literally a little blip, right? They aren't the high-end stuff. And in a way, you know, what they've been saying, and Salmon's been saying, is that, you know, in a way, it's quite a distraction, because suddenly everyone, like Zuckerberg was loving Meta and the Oculus, then large language models appear, and it's like, let's go down and do that, right? You know, it's like a cool thing to be doing, and it's taken the real focus off what, in essence, over here, the deep learning and machine learning capabilities, which were getting some serious traction. I don't know if anyone's used Kaggle before. Kaggle? Ah, we got a Kaggle person, yay. So Kaggle, spelled Kaggle, is Google's kind of, I'm going to say crowdsourcing for a second, but it's not. It's kind of, it's a fun way to get started with machine learning, deep learning projects. So if you go on it, I don't know if you've done it, but there's the basic ones, the Titanic. Have you done the Titanic project? It's one of the things when you enroll, they try and get you to do the Titanic project, which is really interesting. So they provide you all the data, and they give you, you know, the Jupyter notebooks and all the stuff that you need to run it with. And the first example they give you is the Titanic, and they go, what was the correlation between rich or poor based on survival rates? So obviously we've all seen the movie for Leo or whatever else, or the purposes we wanted to see it for. And so we think, based on watching the movie, of course, the rich people got off. That's the logical thing, right? The rich got off, and then poor Jack, or whatever his name was, you know, drowned and, you know, sank to the bottom of the thing, and then she lost through that thing in the ocean, and then Brittany brought it back. I don't remember the story, right? It was kind of confusing. But if you do the project on Kaggle, it's all free. You realize that actually most of the poor people got off the boat, and not many of the rich people did. So it gives you a whole project, and you take the data, and they have a competition, and you can win quite a lot of money, actually. So whenever we get stuff that's too hard for our tiny brains to work, we'll post it onto Kaggle, and they'll put like a 50K, you know, prize for whoever solves it first. And so you can go on there. A good way to, I say, make some money, but but you get a ranking in essence based on your results that you publish. So check it out. It's a great place if you want to do the ML stuff, which obviously we're not doing today, but yeah, it's a great place. So has anyone heard of Eliza? Yeah. Yep. So you know the story with the secretary, right?
More or less.
So in theory, this is the first large language model that was ever created in essence back in the 60s, 1965. So my understanding, I should really read the Wikipedia page, it probably would have helped. But this MIT researcher wanted to do a human experiment. I think it was a psychology professor, wanted to do a psychological profile of seeing how humans would interact with computers. And what was fascinating about it was Eliza, which is what it was named after, I think, eventually, was the secretary who worked for the professor who got completely hooked on using the app. Like literally like we doom scrolling now, but she was completely, besotted by the fact that this thing could talk to her about anything she wanted. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm feeling really good. How are you feeling? Oh, I'm really good. How's your daughter? And it's like, how does it know about my daughter? It's all this kind of like horrible kind of thing, but it was so old, she found it she just got completely hooked. Anyway, it was a great case study. And they did release the software for it. You can see the Radio Shack, which I don't think exists anymore in the US. But it was the first computer program that was in essence just a large language model because you could have this conversation component with it. But I remember I mentioned James Whittaker. So James and Jason wrote the book on how Google tests. And then James also worked at Microsoft for quite a long time. And a guy called Alan Page, who's a good friend, he did a book called How Microsoft Tests. So Microsoft wrote one after James wrote How Google Tests, right? And I remember sitting down with James and Alan, and we're talking about the Microsoft Teenager, which went live. You saw that on Twitter. I can't remember the lady. They put this their first generation AI on Twitter, and it literally got banned after 48 hours of being online because it started racially abusing people and stuff. It was really quite bad. And they always did these little mini projects to see, very similar to Eliza, to see how things would interact. And so in the old Microsoft Seattle office, they used to have this kid on a swing as you went into reception, and you could sit down to it and talk to it. And, you talk backwards and forwards, have a conversation. It was the Cortana or whatever days when it was just starting the exciting virtual assistant. And James said it creeped him out every time he went into the office. But he said one day he was sat on the thing doing some work on his phone, waiting for the taxi or whatever to pick him up. He started having a conversation with it like he always did, but he usually could say rude things to it or be nasty to it or whatever, which don't be nasty to AI, by the way. This is not good. Just add you to the list that they're internally keeping. Anyway, and he said, it asked him how his daughter's birthday was. And he'd never talked to her about his birthday, and he never given the information, and he was completely freaked out. Now, what was interesting is that it already had a lot of the information around Microsoft employees and all the other stuff. So it already had a set of information about him, his Wikipedia profile, which did mention his daughter. So the information was there. He'd never shared that information with it, but it knew it because it already had information, which is the RAG architecture, right? It knew about the employees at Microsoft, their names, et cetera, and their bio pages. So freaky AI, has been around for quite a long time, but Eliza has definitely started the trend off. And so this is the timeline, right? And so I'm not going to go through rule-based machine translation because it's not that exciting. But this is interesting. Is one of the examples we're going to do, and we might do it now just so we can A, get our laptops warmed up, and B, actually do something in a workshop is you can see here they've got over the line, right? But you probably remember back in the days when you were doing, touch typing. If anyone did Mavis Beacon, that shows my age a little bit. But you'd always type in, what was it? Something jumps over the whatever. Yeah, it uses every key, right? And so you'll find that if if Carl was here, he would, well, he got insulted Jason the other day when I on a call with him by saying, "Oh, it's just a word, or it's a fancy autocorrect function, right? Because it knows the next word in the sequence." But it's interesting if you say, I'm going to say, long time ago, it will guess in a galaxy far, far away, right? Because in essence, the way that the system's been trained is that it sees the pattern. And so if you put something like once upon a time, which is what we're going to try in a second, it expects there's going to be some story variables that follow it. Once upon a time in Greece, and so it guesses the next few words, and that's how it knows to create a story based on that kind of structure. So I don't know if one of the things we're going to try and do is, I think ChatGPT, is it free now? I'm so out of date with ChatGPT. But if you want to sign up to ChatGPT, it's our opportunity to win some free coffee things to start putting in. And just create me a story in the style of once upon a time and finish the line and see what it comes back with, how well it does that first prompt. I mean, that's the first easy task for Philippa to try and get everyone onto ChatGPT. Yeah, ask ChatGPT and see what kind of responses it gives you. It's blocked on the Wi-Fi. That's hilarious. So try Jonathan.ai. So hard to spell my name, but try Jonathan, Jonathon, which is this one. Jonathan and then .ai, and then you can talk to my AI. Let me have a look. Let me put it up here. So if you go to Jonathan.ai, oh, you've got on ChatGPT. How did you do it?
With my personal.
Personal thing. So you definitely get a cup for just being the first person to be able to understand and bypass the thing. And I don't even know where this. Have you done it? Oh, that's 2 cups. Well done. You've got the grease one. Congratulations. I'll fill it in for seriously. I use cookies apparently. I must be a cookie monster. So in theory, you'll find that Jonathan.ai is a little bit freaky. So if you ask it, I know, tell me a story starting with once upon a time. I get my zoom up into crazy site. Fine-tune it on my bad sense of humor, I tell that for anything. Once upon a time, in a world where technology reigned supreme, there was a small village plagued by bad software. Turned to a young and talented software engineer named Lily, who had a reputation for her exceptional coding and problem solving. That's not bad. Power of good software to save the world. On brand. That's what we like to see. keeps it going. So hopefully everyone.
But you know what?
Information
I'm really curious.
database you use. What's your
So this is GPT 4 Turbo behind the hood. It has a RAG architecture, so it's actually got all the testing, ISO, IEEE, ISTQB, all the databases stuck behind it, and so that's where it gets all its most of its information from. So in essence, it's a fine-tuned variant of, in essence, a base model. But you can tell that obviously it's quite outgoing a little bit, maybe a bit too outgoing. You know, it's let's see what it comes back. Ah, well, there you go. Not very. It's
Super interesting that. So I tried GPT-4o, I tried Claude.
Yep.
I tried Gemini 1.5 Pro, and all of these models are using a woman as the main protagonist. And most of them are named Lily. So Claude also has a Lily.
Just with an O on the end, so it's with O. My mum spelt me wrong, so apparently my name was named Jonathan with an O at the end. Yeah, don't ask me why.
All right.
There you go.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, my mum named me after a fashion store which had spelt the name incorrectly in the first place, which was great for domains because I got Jonathan.ai. So thanks for the thing. But yeah, it's interesting that. Download some software packages. Okay. So that was us doing a bit of deviating from the plan, but kind of fun. It's quite interesting what you just said there in the sense of saying it, the fact that.
Because fairy tales are mostly about like Cinderella, Snow White.
Yeah. So you think that the bias is trained into that? Because this is the other thing is obviously we all saw what happened with Google recently, minus they lost 20 billion off the stock price for the time when they overtuned it the other way because they wanted to get gender bias and everything else. And then it was coming back with these horrendous, images, which I can't talk about. But, part of it is they went the other way. And this is the interesting thing. I typically will avoid bias at all costs for many good reasons because it's where the information where it's trained on. And this is also, I think, partly the problem with GPT, which is why it's hiding behind here and shall not be named throughout the landscape, is that if we were being completely honest, and I've been on a call with Sam, so I'm going to apologize. Sorry, Sam. Is that when they trained it on the internet, but also on things that weren't on the internet, right? So bit of a question there of what do you mean that wasn't on the internet? And I'm not going to say the deep web because the dark web because it feels a bit too storytelling-y. But obviously, initially there was a whole stack of lawsuits around copyright infringement because the entire Harry Potter books are on there. And how did they get on there? And you think to yourself, I'm not going to say Philippa's fault, but Philippa shares it in a file structure on her FTP site and shares it with a friend. This crawls the website, transposes the directory structure and takes everything it can find off the file system. Suddenly, it's got some copyright material that it's used to train in its database. So the problem is as much as ChatGPT seemed like the easiest way to suddenly get a lot of information, it felt like magic. There was an ethical question around where that information came from. And should it have been indexed in the first place, right? So that's why it hides over here. And then the second thing, which is partially the problem, is obviously we're on GPT-4. Where do you think GPT-4 was trained? Well, it was trained on everything GPT-3 had plus everything else. And what's happened since 3 and 4 is that there's all this generative stuff that's been generated onto the internet, which is rubbish, which it's now also training against that rubbish. So in essence, it's deteriorating in quality as it goes through, even though it's augmented by its huge data set, is if there's more information, which is garbage, it's just going to end up being worse over time. And this is kind of where the dilemma is going, is are they going to get any better? They think there's an incremental improvement from 4 to 5, but it probably isn't going to be as much of an improvement as it was from 3 to 4. So there is a question around that. And then secondly, you'd say, well, like you just pointed out, there is other models, right? So there are other models that have been trained on much more ethical sources of information using the same technology, and some that are more questionable, you know. So, you know, the one we use, which is what's built into our solution. So we, not trying to sell it to anybody, but so what we use is a large language model router. So we have, oh, it means I'm going to have to get rid of this beautiful border thing. I wonder if there's a spray. Oh, there it is.
Maybe you don't need to try without it.
This is where I should have asked. Yeah, I think it worked better with the hand sanitizer. Is this hand sanitizer? It's that, or it says bleach or whatever, and I'm just going to be like that, sat there going. ChatGPT is still hidden around the back of the banner. I can use that now. So now, depending on which audience you're using, it's either router or router, depending on which side of the pond I'm on. So we'll go with router today, the correct English definition. So as anyone, hopefully everyone's watched Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, right? Anyone not watched it? Only one, that's good. Feeling very brave. This is when I realized that I'm really bad at just drawing anything. That's a fish, just in case anyone wanted to know. Slightly worrying now. But so with a large language model router, what in essence you're doing is you're detecting what type of input you've got. So in your case, we just talked about a story. Now, if I was going to use a story, then I would choose something that's going to be the best for story generation. So what model would you use? Philippa? I would use the Jura Zephyr.
Oh, you mean an actual story? I thought you were talking about.
I know, that's what I meant. That's the whole point, joke. But I'd use the tuned variant from Jura Zephyr to write a story for me. Now, obviously, we all now know that we're not talking about a story. Obviously, the problem with the English language is it's ambiguous and therefore, thing. But in theory, if I detect that as a Jura story, then I would use, and we do use, the Gherkin Zephyr story generator. And then what happens is, goes in, I'm going to make it a fish hook. I don't fish either, so that doesn't it. And then what happens? It poops out, given, when, then. It's about as far as I can go there. So I remember a couple of years ago drinking cocktails with Dan North, talking about BDD. He doesn't like BDD, even though he did create it. But part of it is the reason why I'm using a fine-tuned variant, and this is only 1.6 billion, is because this has got a whole stack of if I go on to Hugging Face, this has got a whole stack of training data from thousands of projects from real people using Jura. I also think maybe Jura, knowing the Australians, they probably decided to just take real production data as well to do their models. But they've created a fine-tuned variant that is very good at consistently creating stories. So if I gave this to OpenAI, OpenAI is the same as, it is in essence a mixture of experts, 7 billion times by 8, 7 times 8 billion, I think. So that's 70 gigabytes-ish. This is a very general model. It won't consistently create me the same level of consistency of output than this 1.6 billion model will do. So the reason why we use the large language model router is to make the decision based on the task which you're trying to solve to which model you want to be able to use. So the thing is, certain models are going to be better than other models for certain tasks. Interestingly, if I then took that and then fed that back into this poor fish is going to be getting. If I fed that back in, I would then pass it to what's that version? I'll just use Codex T5. If I passed this given when then statement to Codex T5, which is pretty much the GitHub for Copilot model, what's going to come out? Philippa, you've never been to my workshop. What do you think the fish is going to poop out?
Steps implementation.
Oh, there's the code. The code.
There you go. It's going to give you the code. So I'm then passing the large language router an executable specification and asking it to create me code. It will then generate me code. Again, I could ask the mixture of experts, OpenAI, again, to generate me code. Is it going to be as good as GitHub for Copilot's model? No. So straight away, these 1.6, I think this one's a little bit bigger, actually. No, it might only be 1.6 billion. So these little models are going to outperform OpenAI for both of these tasks. So what you can do, which is, I think, are you using LLM Studio on your?
Yeah.
So if you, it's going to be too big to download now, but if you download LLM Studio, you can then bring down the models for each one. So which models are you using?
I mean, on my laptop, I have a few. I use CodeStraw. When 1.5 is really good for coding, although a bit controversial because it's training. Code Llama is really good. Starcoder 2, also a very good model.
I can't. Well, I'll write them all down later. But what you'll find is when you go to the front of LLM Studio, you'll see the ones that are trending in essence, right? And I think that there's a code instruct version, isn't there, on the front page at the moment? Yeah. And so, yeah, so what you'll see is if you see the word instruct strapped onto a model, what it means is it's been given the conversational capability to speak to a human. So it's not just a model that's going to, in essence, process just code on its own without any prompts. Now, in all fairness, I don't use the instruct models. And the reason is I don't want all this, yes, Jonathan, I'll generate something for you now. I just want the code. So, sometimes instruct models are good for when you want to do your initial prompting. But once you've got past your prompt, you can kind of ignore having the niceties of how are you feeling today? Yeah, I'm fine, thanks. So I'm not saying you're going to have to do this today, but what I'm saying is it's a good place to start. It's free. All these models can do. And then what I've been trying to get people to do at the moment is find a good starting point with a prompt, because we're going to talk about prompt chains and prompt tuning today in a bit more detail this afternoon. But the idea is that once you've got a good prompt that's giving you consistent results, in essence, you can put that in your prompt bank, right? So, I know that if I'm passing it in my transcript from Teams, you obviously don't want to ask it each time Jonathan gets mentioned, add that to my to-do list, because you're not called Jonathan. So you create your own prompts around it. Now, Jason's method, which I think is probably the best method that I've found, but we'll open them up later, is to do your prompt. So it's not correct, but I'm going to call this one-shotting, even though it's not officially. So I do my first prompt, and my first prompt might be something like, what is Keysight? That could be, the first prompt that I put in. And I will probably get a response, which is pretty good, but I could probably estimate I'm only going to get a response that's maybe 250 characters long or 600 characters long. It's not going to be a very big prompt. It's just going to be a little response telling me Keysight is originally Hewlett-Packard, blah, blah, blah. Probably, if I'm lucky, the Wikipedia quote, right? That's the kind of response I'm expecting. Now, the trick which Jason uses is his second prompt is always, what prompt should I have asked to get the best response? And then what happens is, I'm going to call it second shot, even though it's not, the response here and then what I typically do is I compare that to my original prompt and say, okay, I should have said, in my first prompt, I should have asked it, what is Keysight, a technology company based in Silicon Valley? Was a better prompt question I should have asked than just what is Keysight. So I use every second prompt should be, what prompt should I have used on the last prompt to get the better answer? And then you shoot that response at it, look at the response that you get out of it and compare the difference between your one shot and the prompt that it recommended. So that's the Jason Arbon methodology. I'm going to call it the Jason methodology there. It's probably the easiest one. I'm sure he'll love that. But that is a really good one to try. So I don't know who's got their phones, but if they want to just try something and see what the prompt that it suggested you should have done looks like, while I sit down and compensate life. I'm going to ask Jonathan what question I should have asked Jonathan. Alt-tab? Oh, that's so good. I bet I don't have a proper instruct on here, do I? Whoop. Don't shout at ChatGPT either. All caps, not good. So mine's come back with, can you share a captivating tale set in a world where technology battles against the forces of bad software? Now, to me, that's too specific because I asked it open-ended because I wanted it to use its creativity to create, whereas now that's just narrowed the field. So if I ask that same question back to it now, is it going to be a better response than the first one I get from About Lily? Or is it going to be the exact same thing? Now, obviously, the one consistency in life and large language models is never shall the two messages be the same. But interestingly, this is a lot longer than the previous response.
match?
Because it's a longer prompt.
Can you go back to the first question you put, just compare to?
So the first one was, tell me a story starting with once upon a time.
That's very generic, and then it generates a prompt with a more specific based on the result of the keys, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because it has it in the context.
But interestingly, in a way, this has failed me because it started with in a realm where technology, whereas I wanted it to start with once upon a time. So in a way, it's failed my entry criteria because I wanted a story starting with once upon a time.
But this, I guess, depends on the model you're using. Some models might be there. For example, I'm using like in LM Studio now. It's a MiQ Requant, so it's an IXXS version of MiQ.
Yeah.
And it actually started with once upon a time, although I wouldn't have expected it.
But that's the thing is, the reason why it starts once upon a time is because it's had more training sets of fairy tales that start with once upon a time than it would do any other stories, apart from obviously Star Wars, which starts a long time ago, which makes no sense because that means it's in the past in a galaxy far, far away. Oh, sorry, I thought you were. But you know, that's probably a deviation from the normal storytelling, which is once upon a time, which is more fairy tale stories. But interesting. So again, not to confuse my point and rule it out if its own thing, is that this word-based system of being able to understand the next, in essence, the next letter, has its advantages and disadvantages, right? And so, you know, I think partly why when we all get very excited about the fact that it's creating code, it's not really creating code, right? It's just taking GitHub's every code of line that needed to ever be written to every single code that's ever been written to reply back to you. And everyone's written a file to read an array and do something, right? So in a way, it's really helpful. But the other thing, which is one of my favorite things, what it does, which is back to this poor misused fish, is also, this is, I give the benefit now to my, one of our competitors, a guy called Vu who runs Catalan. Catalan have a really good use case where they'll take code and then get it to excrete out comments for what the code does. And that makes the code actually really useful and readable. So, you know, this is a really good method for not only documenting your own code, but also, in a way, I feel like I'm letting too many cats out of the bag today. I'm going to blow everyone's mind now, just to confuse things a little bit. Is so when I said about this Babel fish, you know, this universal translator, the future of the world, translating code to language to code to language, whatever, voice, audio, text, images, the whole thing. Part of it is it's all based on how much it's been trained on, right? So, you know, the reason why I've put WebDriver is WebDriver Selenium is a W3C standard for browser automation, right? So what does that mean? Well, because it's a W3C standard, there's probably more Selenium code out there than there's Playwright code, even though Playwright is probably a smarter choice. I say that because downstairs they're running a robot framework, and if I said robot framework, I'd be promoting their session. You might go down after lunch. So plus we've just realized that actually you'll never need to code anyway, so there's no point in going to that session because you'll just get you fish to do it for you, right? So what's interesting about this? Well, again, not to break everyone's dreams and things, is that large action models, i.e. what everyone in Sam's team's doing now in OpenAI in the Valley, is creating automation. Well, what are they creating? Would be the question. Are they creating Selenium? Do you think they're creating Selenium?
And this was also in the news with the Rabbit device, right?
Oh yeah, that didn't do very well, the Rabbit device. So spoiler alert complete, they're actually creating it in Python, auto test. And why do you think they've gone Python? They've gone Python because there was a bigger code repository of Python libraries than there was Selenium libraries. And so they realized that actually consistency, it's easier to run things in Python. So interestingly, all the stuff in Copilot Plus, all the stuff that's under the hood on all the next generation stuff, what will come out in the next few years, is running Python. It's just Python auto test. So if you were going to invest your time in learning any languages to do, automation, but don't worry about sense talk here, Python might be a good one because this is going to be pretty much everything in the automation landscape is going to be a Python script. That is, in essence, pooped out of this fish. I don't know why I've got a fascination with this, but unfortunately, that's what Douglas Adam wanted. So, I can't be blamed. I think
most of the models that you can find on LM Studio are fine-tuned for
Python, yeah. So most of the outputs, if you are going to use a generalized model, Python is probably the most consistent output for code. So that's really interesting because literally what they're doing, which is very scary, is, and this is why Elon was really upset about the whole thing, only because he didn't think of it first. But like we're all using our phones and clicking on different parts on the screen, and let's say it's Salesforce, right? So, of course, you've got a Salesforce deployment within your organizations. Hundreds of people are using Salesforce every day, clicking on things, creating orders, going through workflows, doing all that stuff. This is, in essence, looking at what everyone's doing. And I would class this as process mining. I'm buttoning my shirts now. And that's been around a very long time. Now, what you've got, if you go to Copilot Studio, what Copilot Studio is starting to see is it's starting to see tasks from all of these items, all the workflow tasks, workflow A, workflow B, workflow C, and it's looking at all the tasks. So just like we all wanted to do with RPA, but for some reason RPA just didn't become as big as it actually should have been, or IPA, which is a great drink, which is but also intelligent process automation. In essence, it's observing behavior and looking at repeatable workflows and then suggesting them as workflows that you can put into your chain. So this is what LAM's in essence doing, is it's measuring what people are doing. And as people are using your laptops today and everything else, is it's working out how humans interact with systems. And then it's, in essence, replicating it with the Python auto test. So that's what Sam's big vision is to replace people doing mundane tasks in their organization by process mining and, in essence, removing inefficiencies. I see what they're trying to do. People aren't going to be very happy about it because but really the whole human in the loop aspect is machines can't make these kind of decisions themselves. There has to be a human, I'm going to use the word overlord for a second, but there has to be a human in the loop. On all of these systems, especially critical systems. You might say, oh, well, setting up an invoice or setting up a new account for a customer or something, that should be automated anyway, right? But that's what they're trying to build now, is this ability to detect tasks that are repeatable. And the whole point of automation is that it's removing repetitive tasks, right? So if you're doing something every day and you could just speak to GPTO and say, can you set me account up for that new customer that we've got onboarded? And it just goes off and does it, right? And that's what they refer to now with the visualization of thought, this as open-ended real-world tasks. And the idea behind that is I used to call it, before that term started trending, I used to call it like the difference between short-term memory and long-term memory is you're solving problems at a much wider area. So there was something called Auto GPT, which came out a few years back. And the idea behind that is that in essence, it's like a brute force attack of large language models trying to solve a problem. So the idea with an open-ended real-world task is I can say, I want to buy some Jordans in green. And so where does it buy it? Where does it buy the trainers from? Well, it can go online, go onto Bing if it wanted to. Someone's going to go onto Bing, so you may as well have one user on it. And then literally type in green Jordan sneakers, right? And it would come back loads of results, right? Or I could take a photo of this and it could go and look via the image search, right? So we know Bing does that. We know how the search works. So where's it going to buy it from? Well, it's probably going to go and look on Nike first, right? And if you think of Nike as the website, and also a Greek word, you know, part of it is it'll go to Nike.com and go and look for green Jordan sneakers. Now, if you remember the whole robots.txt files that exists on websites, that was to help index SEO, but the whole robots.txt is what I'm going to say Bill, but he's not there anymore. But Microsoft are trying to do is they're trying to say, if you build an application like Photoshop, you give us all the endpoints, which are like APIs, but automation endpoints. So that way I can say to Adobe Premiere, you know, remove the background from all this video and then also add closed captions. I can just ask the task to a LAM and it will go, oh, you've got Photoshop. Or it'll say, you don't have Photoshop, but I can go onto the internet, search for background removal tool, and I can upload your video onto that and try and do it that way. But then it might only do an image. So it's got to find something that does a video. Eventually it goes to runway.ai, uploads the video onto there and removes the background from that. Now, I've just told it, go remove the background off this video. And it's worked out either you've got Photoshop and it'll do it really quickly, or you'll go online and find another provider to do it. So what's in it for Photoshop is they have all the automation endpoints in essence fully documented, like robot.txt. It means customers are going to be like, well, yeah, you should have Adobe on all of your account, all your customers, because it's going to be, you know, mean that they can edit videos really quickly, or, you know, remove background if they're in marketing or something. This might just be a marketing automation tool in the future. So they're building it in. And so going back to the Nike idea is it'll go to Nike.com and then it'll go, okay, I can buy these Jordans for $69, right? And then its next task is going to be like, okay, well, is Jonathan happy to pay $60 for these trainers? Or shall I now go to Amazon or eBay or another website, a discounted website, and try and find a better price? Now, I haven't specified my details. I've just said, I want some green Jordans. It might say, you know, I found them on Nike. I'm going to go and process that. So it then tries to log in. Well, it can't log in because I haven't given it my details. So it just signs up. It knows my email address. It already can get the acceptance number. It knows my credit card details. It knows my address details. It's gone through, and tomorrow I just get a pair of trainers. And I didn't go on any websites. I didn't buy anything shopping. It did the task that I wanted it to do. And that's how in the future, you know, everything will be. And so if you unfortunately use Instagram too much, you'll see Instagram, I could literally take a photo now and order one of those air conditioning units on the other side of the area just by clicking on the picture. So Google Marketplace and Instagram Marketplace, which I depressingly found out yesterday, that Zuckerberg sells more shopping products than Amazon. So Jeff Bezos doesn't make as much money as Zuckerberg because people buy more stuff through Facebook, Instagram, and all the other things. And that is depressing as things that he owns such a large percentage of the shopping industry. And you're thinking, why? It's obviously Jeff Bezos who owns it. Well, no, if you control things, and that's why Google Marketplace will do, is I can literally take the photo of the Starbucks cup or whatever else, and it will go and find me the product. And unfortunately, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they have got their instant gratification. They don't want to sign up to shoes.com and get email spams and set up. They just want one click, buy. Click on that watch. I want that watch. It comes, right? That's it. That's simplicity done. Whereas we're all sat there going, yeah, but look at all these kind of back end workflows, and you can shop around and move around. But actually, it's about just the purchasing thing, and this is why influencers and everything else, and just make so much money, because they're just, in essence, middle people for selling stuff to Gen Z, Gen X kind of landscapes.
Yeah, but there needs to be some verification. So in your example with the Nike,
yeah,
there needs to be some system to verify the authenticity of the shop.
Exactly, and this is where
Scamming will be booming.
Oh yeah.
Just create a fake page
On
selling some
Facebook
products and
Marketplace, it will be certain. As
Yeah.
a seller, the LLM will be scammed for sure.
Oh yeah,
Because
100%.
there are like 1 million bots spamming for details.
Yeah. And the thing is even worse if you think about, like what we've just set up here. If I've got a Raspberry Pi with that Wi-Fi code in, put a proxy on it, I'm intercepting all of your traffic, right? I could host Amazon here. You guys would think you're buying it from, but you're actually you're hitting my Raspberry Pi, and yeah, if your browser notices it, it might point it out as unsafe. But otherwise, in theory, you get away with it, right?
you will also need to install a certificate on their device.
On their device, yeah. If you want, well, that's the other thing to it. But what's interesting about this example is it does feel like the future is going to be, places like Shopify and places like Amazon. Part of it is they're going to pivot towards automation because they want to be a certified seller that can process that kind of transaction safely, right? And you will see the same follow for, hotels, Uber, everything else. Just kind of, well, yeah, there'll only be 6 or 7 locations that are certified endpoints that you can trust. Now, interestingly, I feel like I want to see if this door is a whiteboard. The thing that is painted kind of makes me feel that it isn't. But, interesting, about 7-8 years ago, James stood up in Vegas. James Whitaker stood up and talked when he was still at Microsoft before he left, second time round. And he literally did a demo with O365 back in the day, or actually it was Outlook. And he did a demo with an email coming in with a change of a workshop date. And then he showed literally it going off in the background, changing his flight, changing his Avis booking, changing his hotel, all based on an email coming in to say your meeting's been moved from Toronto to Vancouver now on the Thursday. And it literally just rebooked everything and reorganized it all and put him into his, his normal car, normal hotel chain, everything else. And that was 7 or 8 years ago. And that was Microsoft. Yeah, and they like we all found out the other week, which was the most depressing thing ever, is all the Amazon Fresh locations, which were in San Francisco. People were walking in, buying a bottle of water, walking out, thinking, check out this new future with all the stuff. It was just a whole stack of people in Indonesia watching video streams and then charging people's Amazon's accounts. So they didn't even have. It's a whole scam. It's not even a legitimate thing. It's the technology's not there. So even though you think you're going into the future by walking in and having a tillless thing, they've now got 1,000 people offshore just watching videos and seeing everything. Oh no, other shops probably do, but the Amazon Fresh thing is a complete scam.
Wow, that's crazy.
But this is the future of the industry, I think. Right, so it's 12 o'clock. We'll probably go for another quarter an hour, and then we'll or half an hour, and then we'll take a break and get some coffee and.
I just asked Kyriaki. She said that we will have lunch like 1 or 1.5, and we can do the breaks however you like.
So what time's lunch?
Like 1:30.
1:30. Okay.
1 hour, in an hour from now. So we can do a small break now.
Yeah, let's do a small break now. So 15 minutes, everybody, and then we'll come back, and then we can grab a coffee, grab a few coffees.
Some life lessons.
Yep.